CMD and CEO at Affle India, joining in on the show right now. Anuj, hi, good morning. Great to have you on the show. Hope all things well with you as well as the Affle family.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. Yes, thankfully everything is well with the family and all Affles are doing all right.
Okay, great. Now, I'm just looking at what your financials look like. And we've recently seen a very robust second quarter performance from you, both sequentially as well as annually. Has COVID accelerated the transition of organizations towards mobile advertising? And what are the key trends that you observed in the quarter gone by, or for that matter, the last 2 quarters?
Well, absolutely. I think the COVID phenomena has definitely made consumers, much more married to their connected devices, especially the mobile smart screen, than ever before. The writing was always on the wall. I guess the mega trend was here to stay. But what has happened is that the acceleration of this adoption, and it's not just about spending time on the mobile screen, but people are actually transacting a lot more as consumers. You and I mean, we are, generally, using the mobile a lot more comfortably to make payments, to, procure things, and the average value and the volume of the transactions is going up increasingly across emerging markets. India, certainly, as well as in Indonesia, other Southeast Asian emerging markets, Africa, Latam. So across the board in emerging markets, we have seen that the consumers are disproportionately spending time on the mobile screen. They are transacting more frequently, and the value of those transactions are going up. And consequently, the marketers are also responding the same way. They are spending a lot more of their marketing budgets on mobile more than anywhere else. And I think this trend is here to stay. And there is still a very, very long runway for growth because, the number of smartphone users is only going to increase. And the penetration will continue to go deeper, especially in India with tier 3 as well as rural, demographics of consumers all coming on board in a big way and transacting. So, definitely very bullish about the trend. So last 6 months have been a validation that, this business is resilient, and going forward as well, I hope the trends would continue.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There is no option. Your mobile is turning out to be your window to the world, so to speak. So can we extrapolate then that second half is likely to be better than first half for you? Is the sequential growth over 40% Anuj sustainable going forward?
Well, I wouldn't say the sequential growth of 40% is the dimension to look at, because quarter one was obviously more deeply impacted with the lockdowns and quarter two was not, right? But the year-on-year trend is perhaps a much better way of looking at the business. If you compare us on a H1 to H1 basis, or even if you take a 3 years CAGR growth trend on a PAT performance basis, we did exceptionally well. I think over 60% or roughly 60% growth in PAT over the 3 year CAGR period. And in the most recent quarter, Q2, year-on-year basis, we grew almost 70% plus on the PAT basis. Now that, I think, is something to definitely look at. And we do expect Q3 to be our better quarter. Typically in every financial year, Q3, which is October, November, December, due to the festive season, the year-end holidays and so on, is generally much better. But given that this year the holiday season is, obviously still impacted because of COVID, people are still largely staying indoors, not necessarily planning family holidays or spending as much. Even with that, at the moment, the trend line is clear that we should be doing better in Q3 than in Q2. And hopefully the trend continues as well into Q4, Jan, Feb, March. So H2 is generally going to be better than H1. And, I wouldn't really comment on how much growth one would get. I don't provide short-term guidances, but the broader trend is definitely positive.
Good to hear, Anuj. Good morning. Avan joining in as well. Now, given the fact that your top 10 verticals have contributed over 90% to your revenues in Q2, do you think that these verticals will continue to contribute the maximum to your overall revenues? If you can just give us a flavor as to how it's really going to constitute in the coming quarters, your top line picture?
Absolutely. So, there are a few ways of looking at our business. We are a consumer platform company. So as long as the consumers are spending more time on their mobile and are transacting more on their connected devices, Affle should see a significant growth trend. And that's because our customers across those top 10 verticals, e-commerce is growing, entertainment is growing, education tech is growing, financial services consumption on mobile is growing, fintech overall as a category is growing much faster. Food tech is growing. FMCG, is also as a category growing, and they are spending on mobile. Government, gaming, groceries, health tech, all of these top 10 verticals, those customers, their own businesses are growing. Our consumers are obviously spending more time on the mobile. So I do expect this 90% of our revenue, which is anchored on these 10 verticals, to continue to see that growth momentum. And the tailwinds are very, very strong to give us that continued momentum and lift. The other way of looking at our business is that 50% of our revenues come from India and are actually anchored in emerging markets. From India, we also expand to Southeast Asian emerging markets, Middle East, Africa, and Latam. Almost 90% of our revenues come from emerging markets, and emerging markets largely see the similar patterns across these verticals. So our focus and strategic focus on verticalizing here, and also the strategic focus of going deeper with consumers with vernacular, hyper-personal experiences for consumers on their mobile devices is anchoring our strategy. And, the revenue is largely going to be driven on driving conversions with consumers on mobile. So we are in a pretty good stead. And of course, we keep trying for new verticals as well and adding them into our mix. And we're quite satisfied with the way the trends are so far.
Yes, fair enough. It is moving to a fairly digital world for sure. And I just want to understand if the entire advertising pie as well, what is the share of the mobile advertising, and what kind of growth can we see there in the next 2 to 3 years? Because going by what you've said, this is definitely going to be a very high pie.
Absolutely. So if you look at emerging markets, so let's say India in particular, one could reasonably say that most of the analyst reports suggest that mobile marketing or digital advertising in India should at least grow 30% on CAGR basis for next 5 years. And if you look at the aggregate growth across emerging markets around the world, it would still be in the 20 to 25% CAGR for next 3 to 5 years. So I'm pretty optimistic that not just the analyst reports and the long-term trends on advertising, but largely looking at the fundamentals of this business, right? If the consumers are only spending, time and attention on this screen and are actually starting to use this not just for consuming ads, but also transacting deeply from this device, then it's a no-brainer that every advertiser should prioritize spending here. In terms of percentage spends, I would say it's hovering around 20% of the total advertising spends that go on this device. And one could look at some of the developed markets and believe in the thesis that in the next several years, potentially 40 to 50% of the total advertising spend would be gravitating to connected digital devices, primarily on mobile screens, and also related connected devices like connected TV, possibly connected wearables, and connected transportation cars, as well as other forms of connected devices. So the omni-channel experience of consumers, whether they are online or they are offline, would be largely influenced by connected devices, especially mobile.
Okay, let's talk about your new product as well, Engage 360. It's a new AI-driven omni-channel marketing platform. Tell us a little bit about it, the kind of impact it's had on business as well.
Sure. See, Engage 360 is a very, a fantastic product for any marketer, because what it's helping the marketers to do is to tell them that you must engage your consumers on every possible touch point, on every possible channel, and see the consumer's journey as one integrated experience. Whether the consumer comes on your website, whether the consumer goes on your app, goes from your app to other experiences or other touch points, or physically comes into your office or retail store location. How do you integrate the consumer's journey and unify and simplify that journey as one consumer's unique journey across all these omni-channel touch points? And Engage 360 basically provides that view to the marketers, also gives them an opportunity to see how do you maximize conversions with consumers on your own touch points before you start spending advertising dollars on third-party properties to show your ads elsewhere. How do you maximize your own touch points with the consumer? So Engage 360 is a fantastic platform for marketers, and we are seeing very strong adoption.
Great. Anuj, also you recently acquired AppNext, and that enables 20 different touch points on device even before the users open any app. Has this also resulted in better revenues? Are you looking at any other such acquisitions as well? Talk to us about that.
So AppNext is a very, very valuable asset as part of the integrated consumer platform that Affle presents to the marketers. And for the investors who are looking at this as an acquisition or any investments that Affle has done even after that, because post AppNext, we've done two other investments, one in OS Labs, which is Indus OS, and the other one, which is Bobble AI, which are both indigenous experiences for consumers in India, deeply embedded on the device, whether the App Store or the keyboard experience on the device. So Affle's theme of investments is very, very clear. We are actually focused on going deep on device experiences with consumers, looking at vernacular experiences, indigenous, hyper-personal, hyper-local experiences for consumers, and therefore delivering value on data-driven, ROI-linked marketing to the marketers. So all of these investments are actually consolidating our strength as a consumer platform as one integrated platform for the market here. It is not unlike some of the other companies who may be making investments to diversify. Affle is actually making investments to double down with a very clear focus on a single big business unit, which is a consumer platform, CPCU, cost per converted user-based business model. And all of these investments are strengthening our strategic moat, our competitive advantage, and very importantly, making us an ecosystem level player with the OEMs, the handset manufacturers, seeing us as a very strong monetization partner, as well as a partner who can deliver very rich and deep vernacular experiences to the consumers as we go deeper down in India. And India is already at 600 million connected devices as on date. One could reasonably forecast that in the next 3 years, we would probably exceed 1 billion connected devices in India alone. And as that happens, you've got to look at how can we connect in a much more personalized manner with the consumers in tier 3 or even rural areas and so on. So I think each of these investments that we have made have strengthened the Affle 2.0 strategy for the decade ahead and has laid a very solid foundation on which we can then have predictable growth and consistent performance going forward. I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you very well.
Right, just going to come in there, and there is a risk of regulation in India as well, in terms of privacy, in terms of sharing personal information. What is your view on how you're, looking at the overall regulatory environment, and how will you evolve Affle's business model in light of this?
See, I've been leading Affle as the founder for over 15 years. We started Affle in April 2005 in Singapore. And why I'm stating that is if you look at one of the first patents that Affle filed, the title of the patent says consumer acceptable advertising. And so the consumer is the central point of whatever Affle has done in the 15 years, and we are a very responsible citizen in this space. We therefore believe that regulation is absolutely welcomed. It is necessary. And given our roots of having started the company in Singapore, let me also share that the Singapore regulatory environment is very forward-looking. They had the Personal Data Protection Act well before Europe had GDPR or US had any similar acts in place. And given that we were born out of here, we ensured that we were not only proactively compliant, but also demonstrating credentials where we are accredited by Singapore's Infocomm Media Development Authority as an entire tech stack and platform. We were accredited twice by them prior to going public, and most recently we have again been accredited for the third time. What this means is that, at least as per Singapore's Personal Data Protection Act, or the standards of whatever is the law of the land here, Affle's platform can be safely used by Singapore government agencies to market or promote their services to the citizens, and the citizens' data can be stored in Affle's platform because it is a compliant platform. Now, to keep it simple, for, let's say, when India or Indonesia or other emerging markets where 90% of Affle's business today comes from, none of these markets have any data regulation on date. But in the next 3 years, every single jurisdiction will have some form of consumer privacy related regulation. And Affle sees that moment as part of our competitive advantage and moat. It is not a risk factor, but actually it is our competitive advantage, because every other player or competitor in the ecosystem must rise to the occasion to be compliant. Now, Affle is already compliant as per Singapore standards. We are also part of the industry bodies where we are giving feedback to the regulators on what kind of regulation works and should be there in India. So we will be, ready, and more ready than the others. And we don't see regulation as a risk. We see regulation as part of our moat.
Okay. And the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan includes, reaching out to rural India. Recently as well, we've seen demand from rural India that's been fairly strong. Affle 2.0, how does the company really plan to target the tier 2, the tier 3 towns, the rural penetration? What kind of growth from these areas is going to come in the future?
Well, Affle India is a listed company and a very strong corporate citizen in India. And we chose to list in India because, we believe that, not only this is the place where we have the largest pool of employees, biggest, all our customers, 50% of our revenues is coming from India, and the largest population of, connected devices in one single geography. There's no other country where we have more than 600 million connected devices, reachable through the Affle platform. So we are deeply involved there. We are also supporting the Indian ecosystem by actually investing in other apps like the Bobble AI, the vernacular keyboard that supports over 33 Indian languages officially, and is going to be increasingly found on devices with OEMs like Xiaomi and so on. And this is quite a unique opportunity that Affle is looking at, where when the penetration of digital and connected devices moves from tier 3 to deeper rural areas, how to anchor the Affle 2.0 experiences for the consumer, which are hyper-local, hyper-personal, in the indigenous languages where the consumers have affinity, and delivering the internet to them in the way that relates best to them in their own languages is something that we are already ready for. We've laid the foundational strategies for it. And we are also helping our advertisers to, let's say, launch their local language apps, support them to reach out to consumers deeply within India, as well as in other emerging geographies where, vernacular affinity is going to be an important next strategy for most of the brands and advertisers. So I think Affle is solving this puzzle at an ecosystem level with handset manufacturers, deeply supporting the vernacular language apps all over India, supporting them with advertising, helping them in their strategy to reach out to consumers, and fundamentally delivering an experience to consumers that they can relate to and therefore transact and drive conversions for advertisers with the consumers in rural India as well.
Anuj, I have to ask you, you've targeted, as per your 10-year vision, to reach $10 billion connected devices from the current $2.1 billion as of FY20. How do you intend to get to these numbers?
Well, when we talk about the vision for 10 years in an ecosystem which is largely anchored on digital experiences and technology, it requires some boldness, because 10 years, a lot may change. But one thing that I know deeply is that the consumers and the connected device ecosystem is only going to expand. Every single one of us, today we're talking about a reach of 2 billion connected devices that Affle's platform enables. we look at this from a broader lens. My message is to my technology team, to my CTOs in the company, to all of us as entrepreneurs to look at expanding our thinking, beyond mobile. What's going to happen beyond mobile when everybody's carrying one mobile phone, everybody's wearing more intelligent gadgets, our watches will become smarter, are already becoming smarter. There'll be health devices that we'll be carrying. There'll be, smarter cars, smarter public transport, smarter offices, smarter homes. And when you have these plethora of connected devices, which will all be somehow, managed from the mobile device as the central sort of connector for all of these, it is reasonable to imagine that with a world population of, let's say, around 6 billion, there should be at least more than 2 connected devices that each consumer should be reached upon, if not more than 2. So just taking that thesis in a very simple way and expanding the possibilities of innovation and being ready, being future ready to deal with what are the new form factors, what are the new kind of devices that will come about. So keeping our R&D on its toes, always looking ahead, that's what Affle 2.0 strategy is about. And I think 10 billion might look like a small number 5 years from now, and I may need to revise that as we go along.
Okay. Also want to understand purely in terms of business visibility, who are your key competitors and what are the opportunities for consolidation within the space that you operate in?
See, most of the credible or other listed companies as competitors in this space are largely focused on developed markets, right? Because in developed markets, the unit economics might seem more favorable to them based on their business model. So most of the competition is still working on the business model of either impressions or clicks, which means they're charging the advertisers for mostly showing the ad or getting some initial engagement from the consumer on the ad. But Affle is a much more deeper conversion metrics to the advertiser, much more outcome-linked pricing, much more ROI-linked pricing to the advertiser. And we are focused on emerging markets. Like I mentioned before, 90% of our business is emerging markets. Now, the credible competitors are largely focused on United States, they're focused on Europe, maybe even China, Japan, Korea, Australia. Whereas Affle is, choosing a different battlefield to, keep on strengthening its moat, keep on strengthening the deeper consumer experiences, and in a much harder unit economic market where, I can safely say that India, what you can charge for a conversion or for any form of, unit metrics that you would look at, India is extremely competitive. And if we can make a 20% PAT and a cash flow positive business anchored out of India, that gives us a lot of resilience to go global, not only for emerging markets, but also at some point in time, go deeper into developed markets as well. Whereas the reverse is not so true. The competitors who are having their cost structures based on developed markets and based on the unit economics, which is much more comfortable in developed markets, for them to transition and change their internal operations, their technology, and to also build deeper data and vernacular indigenous experiences for emerging markets is not going to be so simple. So I believe that, I wouldn't want to name any competitor, but, largely a lot of the analysts who cover us, and I'm told there are 5 or 6 analysts who do regular coverage on Affle. They have given detailed sort of reports on who the competitors are, what their valuations are, how are their multiples and so on. I think I'm not so good in that side of the business, but I can tell you that our competitive moat in India is the strongest. In emerging markets, other global emerging markets, we are also very strong with our moat. And I'm not seeing enough of the competitors who are right now anchored in developed markets to transition as easily to come on our turf.
Anuj, it's been a pleasure having you on the channel to talk about the digital push and the opportunities for Affle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me with you.